I believe that now it is time to break the silence. Human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights once and for all. We can create a world in which every woman is treated with respect and dignity.
It's important that we tackle climate change with the utmost urgency because we don't know what is coming tomorrow.
In China, myself and my team are committed to advancing gender equality through law.
In my country, by joining other women, we are positive contributors to the peace process.
We are working with domestic violence against women and children in Russia.
I know that we can end child marriage. We know the interventions that needs to be done. We just need to act.
I know expanding women's rights is the great unfinished business of the 21st century.
That is the work before all of us, who have a vision of the world we want to see.
Good morning and welcome, a very warm welcome to each of you as we come together to recognize and to celebrate women's global leadership in advancing human rights, climate justice, peace, and security. I'm Elaine Verveer, and I'm the director of the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security. Thank you, Secretary Clinton, for being back with us at Georgetown. You know we are very grateful to you for your support of the Institute as our honorary founding chair and for your continuing inspiration. Because the pandemic kept us from gathering to mark the 25th anniversary of the UN Fourth World Conference on Women, this is a belated celebration. It was at the conference, in her historic speech that you just heard, when she asserted that human rights are women's rights and women's rights are human rights. Her words continue to echo around the world to this day. The work continues. Each of our honorees today participated in the Beijing conference, and as you will hear from them, their experience changed their lives and inspired the work that they continue to do to this day. I also want to welcome the members of the Diplomatic Corps whose partnership and support for our work we greatly value. With us are the ambassadors from several countries, from Afghanistan, Canada, Denmark, Germany, Ireland, Italy, Liechtenstein, Lithuania, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Taiwan, and Tunisia, as well as the representative from Qatar. Welcome to each and every one of you. We have many special guests with us today, and I especially want to recognize a group of the most courageous and committed women leaders and human rights activists, women from Afghanistan. With the Taliban takeover, they have been forced to flee their country because of the threats to their lives and their families. We and others have been working to help to evacuate them, and we will continue to support them and their resettlement. 2 Afghans will be with us as distinguished fellows at our Georgetown Institute, and others will be at Georgetown as students, and we welcome them all. And at this point, I hope that the Afghans will stand up so that we can especially tell you how we feel about you. Anybody here from Afghanistan, please. Let me also acknowledge the presence of members of the United States delegation to Beijing, those 26 years ago now, including former Congresswoman Connie Morella. Welcome back. And I would like to recognize the members of the Georgetown ambassadors for the Institute. We are grateful to their chair, Anisha Fritz, and to each of them for their commitment to our work. Lastly, we are pleased that the former Director General of UNESCO is with us, Irina Bukova. Thank you, Irina, for all you have done. And I want to, of course, thank the members of the university leadership who are here, including Dean Hellman of our School of Foreign Service. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce the president of Georgetown. For nearly 4 decades now, he has worked to strengthen Georgetown as a premier institution for education and research. He has also been a steadfast supporter of our work to advance women, peace, and security. He has been deeply committed to ensuring the university supports the people of Afghanistan at this dire time. And he has vigorously advanced the university's commitment to addressing climate change. Please welcome Georgetown's president, Jack DeGioia.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Milan, for your exceptional leadership of the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security. And it's an honor to welcome all of you to Georgetown and to Gaston Hall for this very special event, the presentation of the 2021 Hillary Rodham Clinton Awards for Advancing Women in Peace and Security. And we're privileged to have with us the Honorable Hillary Rodham Clinton, Honorary Founding Chair of our Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security. Secretary Clinton, we're deeply grateful for your presence and for your extraordinary contributions in recognizing the role of women in peace building. We're gathered to honor 5 individuals who have exemplified what it means to serve, protect, and empower vulnerable populations. Patricia Espinosa, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Dr. Marina Pisklakova, founder and chair of ANA, the National Center for the Prevention of Violence in Russia. Palwasha Hassan, executive director of the Afghan Women's Educational Center in Afghanistan. Dr. Nyaradzayi Gumbonzvanda, the African Union Goodwill Ambassador on ending child marriage and founder and CEO of the Rosaria Memorial Trust in Zimbabwe. And Guo Jianmei, founder of the Center for Women's Law Studies and Legal Services of Peking University in China. I wish to offer each of you our sincerest gratitude for your leadership and for this opportunity to recognize your exceptional contributions and accomplishments. Named for Secretary Clinton, this award recognizes her pivotal role in the promotion of women's rights and her distinguished career of public service. As we continue to commemorate the 25th anniversary of the 1995 Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing, we recognize the resounding impact of the words that Secretary Clinton offered that day in her now famous address on women's rights, words that animate our convening today. She said, and I quote, "If women are healthy and educated, their families will flourish. If women are free from violence, their families will flourish. If women have a chance to work and earn as full and equal partners in society, their families will flourish. And when families flourish, communities and nations will flourish." Close quote. 16 years after that seminal speech, in December of 2011, she joined us here on this stage for the launch of the U.S. National Action Plan for Women, Peace, and Security. And with that, we launched our Institute for Women, Peace, and Security, an initiative founded in recognition of the truth that women play a critical role in the security and well-being of communities and nations. And today she serves as its honorary founding chair. Under the extraordinary leadership of Ambassador Milan Verveer, our institute has convened leaders, scholars, and practitioners in dialogue. It has helped forge and strengthen Georgetown's collaboration with organizations engaged in this work across the globe. And through research and innovative scholarship, it has enhanced our understanding of the cultural, political, and economic issues at stake. And it has provided a framework for our students to gain the understanding and experience necessary to develop as compassionate global leaders committed to equity and inclusion for all women as they navigate the challenges of this current moment. So today we are honored to present the Hillary Rodham Clinton Awards for Advancing Women in Peace and Security in recognition of the leadership of Secretary Clinton and the contributions of our awardees. Secretary Clinton has championed the rights and role of women for so many years and the leadership roles in which she has served as First Lady of the United States, as Senator of New York, on the global stage, as Secretary of State, and most recently as the first woman in our country's history to be nominated for president by a major political party. She has strengthened opportunities for women's political, economic, and social engagement, creating and institutionalizing new positions and policies that have helped to ensure greater recognition of women in the economic development, peace building, and political systems in communities and nations around our world. We are deeply grateful for her ongoing commitment and example of public service. And Secretary Clinton, it is a privilege to have you with us again. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Oh, it is so great to be back in Gaston Hall here at Georgetown. It is really one of my most favorite places. And I thank you, President DeGioia, for your visionary leadership of this university and the commitment you have demonstrated over so many years to nurturing diplomats and peacemakers and leaders. This institute is a real reflection of that vision that you have brought to Georgetown. And it is always a personal pleasure for me to be here with my good friend, a Georgetown alum, Ambassador Verveer, who has taken a vision, namely that there should be a place in the world that pursues the study and looks at the implications of women, peace, and security. And that's exactly what the Georgetown Institute has been doing and will continue to do, as Milan is one of the unparalleled champions for women and girls in the world. And thanks to all of you for gathering. We missed being together last year, and it's wonderful to join again in this convening. I love coming to Georgetown for many reasons, but celebrating the Institute is certainly at the top of my list. And I want to, before I make a few remarks about Beijing, to express my deep appreciation to the Institute, to Milan and the Hardy Band that works there, to the university, for their incredible commitment to the challenge of helping to evacuate Afghan women and their families during the crisis that started in August, continues certainly today. We worked closely together on a list of 1,000 women who had been active in education and healthcare, in the government and politics, in the media, in business, in every walk of life over the last 20 years, and whose leadership was moving the country forward, producing positive results for the people of Afghanistan, particularly women and girls, and who were therefore very much under threat when the Taliban took over. And I share Milan's admiration for those women who not only did so much over the last 20 years for their country, but who now, even though in exile, are continuing their work and their advocacy, their education and study. And we will do all that we can with the Institute and other organizations like Vital Voices that worked with us as well to support not only those Afghans who are in this country, but those who are elsewhere in the world. You know, when I think about the Institute, and it does, of course, directly connect back to the conference in Beijing in 1995, I think about how far we have come and yet how far we still have to go. This event this year seems more timely than ever because it's not only the slightly delayed commemoration of the 1995 UN Conference on Women in Beijing, but a recognition that the conference itself was a turning point in both the definition and the fight for gender equality. It brought women from literally every corner of the globe together to insist that human rights are women's rights and women's rights are human rights once and for all. When I made that statement on behalf of the United States government and our delegation, it was controversial. There were those who accused me and therefore the advocacy that we were trying to demonstrate on behalf of women's rights and roles in society, of being anti-family, of being anti-somehow women. And yet today, that statement remains a rallying cry because it's important for us to be constantly reminded about what happened all those years ago in Beijing, because it wasn't only my speech, it wasn't only other speeches, it was the work of the conference that has really stood the test of time. Because the conference, this international gathering, adopted something called the Platform for Action. 189 nations committed to, and I quote, the full and equal participation of women in political, civil, economic, social, and cultural life, end quote. When people ask me, well, what does feminism mean, or what does it mean to be a feminist? I say it means that you are in favor for the full and equal participation of women in political, civil, economic, and cultural life. And that is a positive statement. That is an affirmative call to action. And yes, 25 years later, in many ways, women in many places are better off. We can go down a list of examples. A girl born 25 years ago in Lesotho could not own property or sign a contract. Today she can. In East Africa, a girl born 25 years ago grew up in a region where female genital cutting was widespread. Now the practice has declined significantly, not disappeared, but declined. In 1995, domestic violence was a crime in just 13 countries. Today, it is illegal in more than 100. We've nearly closed the global gender gap in primary school enrollment, and maternal mortality has dropped by more than half. But the work is nowhere near done. We are in the midst of a global struggle between the ideals of this institute and a rising tide of authoritarianism, which has, unsurprisingly, coincided with a crackdown on women's rights. Fundamental human rights, civic virtue, even facts and reason are under assault. Now, I was clear-eyed 25 years ago about the challenges of making progress to fulfill the call of the Platform for Action. But even I have been surprised by the backlashes provoked by women's advancement. It turns out, as useful as the internet has been to organizing, including organizing among women, it has also created a platform for misogynists to spread sexist vitriol and disinformation. Again and again, we have seen anger, hostility, sexism, and even threats of violence directed at women who have the audacity to stand up, to speak out, and yes, to seek power within the family all the way to the White House. That's why the work of this institute and the 5 remarkable honorees we celebrate today is so important. Each of them attended the Beijing conference as a young activist, a young colleague, a young participant. And they went to work, both at the conference and then in the years that followed. They are emblematic of what the conference sparked: a global community of courageous women leaders standing up for equal rights to prosperity, opportunity, and dignity. I want to say just a personal word about the 3 honorees who are here with us. First, to Marina. Marina started the first domestic violence crisis hotline in Russia. She has helped countless women escape domestic violence and put gender-based violence at the top of the agenda in Beijing and has continued to keep it front and center in Russia against constant pushback. Her work is always criticized and under attack, not just from random people, but from people within her own government. And yet she has persevered, and she has done so with great courage and commitment, and she is a real inspiration to me. Patricia is a dear friend of mine. We were lucky enough to serve as each of our country's foreign ministers, I as Secretary of State, she as Mexico's foreign minister, and had the chance to get to know one another, work together. And I marvel at her extraordinary accomplishments. She is someone who can get a job done without seeking or demanding credit or attention, making it possible for a global agenda, whether it's on women's rights and gender equality or climate change, to move forward. She has been a leader in the global effort to address climate change, and she helped push the UN to adopt the Beijing Platform for Action as a young diplomat from Mexico. Palwasha, who attended Beijing as a young woman living under Taliban rule and now leads an Afghan women's network across the country, represents the leadership and courage of Afghan women who continue to fight in the face of enormous and daunting and dangerous odds. I'm really grateful for her and for the other Afghan women that I was privileged to get to know over the last years. They are indeed extraordinarily courageous, committed leaders, and I hope someday they're able to return to Afghanistan safely to continue their work. We will be joined remotely by our two other honorees, who each in her own way has fought for women's rights, women's role in society in every way, women's freedom, women's dignity. Each of these 5 women have shown exceptional courage, creativity, strength, wisdom, and of course, leadership. I know the world is a better place because of their efforts. And despite how easy it is sometimes to get discouraged, disappointed at setbacks and challenges in our own country and all the way around the world, I look at our 5 honorees and I cannot help but be encouraged because they never quit. They don't quit on themselves. They don't quit on their missions and their purposes. They don't quit in pursuing whatever they can to make life better for all the rest of us. So let them be a reminder to us to keep up this fight. It's bigger than any one of us, and it's just as true when we gathered in Beijing as now here today in Gaston Hall, that we have a lot at stake, and we need women leaders from every corner of the globe to continue to stand up, to speak out, and yes, to seek power. Thank you very much.
And now to the awards. When the climate conference opened in Scotland just a few weeks ago, the head of the UN's Climate Change Agency, Patricia Espinosa, pointed out the high stakes. She said, "We stand at a pivotal point in history. Humanity faces several clear choices. We either choose to achieve rapid and large-scale reductions on emissions to keep the goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 Celsius, or we accept that humanity faces a bleak future on this planet." Hers was a call for urgent action. Patricia's leadership of the UNFCCC, is but the latest example of her more than 30 years of public service at the highest levels, where she has specialized in climate change, sustainable development, gender equality, and the protection of human rights. She served as ambassador of Mexico to several challenging posts. In 2006, the former president of Mexico, Felipe Calderón, appointed her to his cabinet as Minister of Foreign Affairs. Not many women held cabinet roles at that point, and she was the only cabinet member to remain in that post for the duration of his presidency and she excelled. Early in her diplomatic career, she played a key role in the often difficult process leading to the adoption of the Beijing Platform for Action, a blueprint for gender equality against which we still measure our progress today. 25 years ago, climate change was not on the Beijing agenda, but women's participation in environmental decision-making was. And Patricia reminded us that climate change or any other challenge of humanity cannot be addressed if we leave half of the population of the world behind. As she pointed out, women are often the key providers of food, water, and energy, and at the same time, they bear the brunt of the climate crisis. They are critical to drafting climate solutions, but are often marginalized from climate leadership, whether at the grassroots, regional, or national levels. Arguably, she said, the world has never faced a greater challenge than climate change. Formidable, bold, and decisive action will be required. Above all, she said, informed and inclusive leadership in the public and private spheres from men and women alike, especially from women whose role in the transformational process will be essential. Patricia has demonstrated that kind of leadership and decisive action. And now to the citation. For her leadership, courage, and determination to meet the challenge of climate change, and for reminding us that no matter how difficult that challenge is, we cannot and must not give up. For remaining true to the lessons learned during the early days of her diplomatic career, working on the Beijing platform to advance gender equality and the need for women's full and meaningful participation in decision-making, and for her commitment to public service in the international arena, and for exemplifying diplomacy at its best. Georgetown is proud to present the 2021 Hillary Rodham Clinton Award for Advancing Women in Peace and Security to Patricia Espinosa. Marina Pisklakova obtained her doctorate in sociology in her native Russia. In the process of doing research, she came across a survey in which the respondent described abuse by her husband. Marina learned that it was a case of domestic violence, a term that had no equivalent translation in the Russian language at the time. Not long after, she ran into a woman with a bruised face who told Marina that her husband had struck her face with the heel of a shoe because she had not sewed a button on his shirt fast enough. Marina was disturbed when she saw the terrible condition of the woman. She told her to leave her husband. The woman had nowhere to go. The police wouldn't do anything, asserting it was a private matter, not a matter for law enforcement. Horrified, Marina felt something had to be done about cases like this. In 1993, she established a hotline for women to report abuse and get help. She was mocked for her work, accused of creating a problem, and not helped by the police. Worse, they seemingly condoned the behavior of the perpetrators. Working mostly alone, she eventually rented space to provide shelter for survivors of abuse. This was just the beginning of her pioneering work in Russia as a women's rights activist determined to save women's lives. At the UN conference in Beijing, Marina, for the first time, saw violence against women placed on the global agenda as a violation of human rights. It wasn't just a private matter, nor a cultural matter, but a criminal offense that needed to be punished. In the aftermath of the conference, the first reliable statistics were published on the extent of the problem in Russia. It reported that 14,500 women a year had been killed by their husbands. Marina resolved that she had to do more. She founded a network of crisis centers across Russia known as the ANNA Network, Association Saying No to Violence. And today there are over 150 crisis centers working with many organizations locally to combat domestic violence. She traveled across Russia's great expanse, trained counselors and those setting up the centers. She trained lawyers in how to handle these cases and worked with the police, although still largely uncooperative, to address a problem that had reached epidemic proportions. She also lobbied for legislation to support survivors of abuse and prosecute the criminals. She created media campaigns to educate women about their rights. And she also worked to address another horrific abuse of mostly women, human trafficking. Although the Russian vocabulary did not once have words to describe domestic violence and human trafficking, today they are well defined. The journey to address these challenges continues, and Marina continues to lead the way. And now for the citation. For recognizing the plight of victims of domestic violence in her country and acting to assist them without support and despite the lack of a roadmap. For persevering against all odds to establish a network of crisis centers across Russia, inspiring and supporting those who take up this work. And for becoming a powerful example of personal courage, determined to tackle violence against women in her country and around the world. Georgetown is proud to present the 2021 Hillary Rodham Clinton Award for Advancing Women in Peace and Security to Marina Pisklakova. As a young Afghan refugee in Pakistan in the 1990s, Palwasha Hassan watched as conflict engulfed her country. Women and girls suffered greatly under Taliban rule, unable to go to school, unable to participate in public life, denied access to justice. When Palwasha attended the Beijing conference in 1995, she saw a global community of women fighting for their rights, and realized what a collective movement of Afghan women could also achieve. With other participants, she went on to create the Afghan Women's Network, which over the next 2 decades served as the foundation for the Afghan women's movement, and she was the driving force behind the progress they have made. Today, the network includes 43 women's organizations and 3,700 individual members. Returning to Afghanistan in 2001, after the Taliban were overthrown, Palwasha led trailblazing efforts as a representative of civil society to ensure that women's rights were respected and recognized in Afghan law. Among many achievements was increasing the political quota in the Afghan constitution for women, and passing the Elimination of Violence Against Women law, family law, the Shiite personal law. Other efforts to uplift and protect women included founding the first women's legal support organization, providing education to women and girls through her organization, the Afghan Women's Educational Center, and facilitating exchanges with global scholars to bring thinking on equality and rights into the Islamic context, and playing a key role to ensure that women were on the Afghan government's peace negotiation teams. As we all know, the past months in Afghanistan have been devastating for Afghan women and girls. The immediate rollback in rights and freedoms have created a place that more closely resembles what Palwasha saw as a refugee 20 years ago. However, the extraordinary leadership and courage of her and her Afghan sisters can never be rolled back. In the weeks and days before Kabul fell, Palwasha continued to lead her organization and serve every Afghan woman who came to her amidst harrowing death threats from the Taliban. Even during her terrifying evacuation journey, she and her fellow evacuees organized influential advocacy efforts with the United States policymakers and led negotiations for better conditions at a holding center for Afghan evacuees in the United States. And today, as a distinguished fellow at Georgetown, Palwasha will continue to lead with others a global collective of Afghan women leaders to chart the path forward. And now for the citation. For inspiring and organizing the Afghan women's movement, it created a place where Afghan women went on to play leading roles in every aspect of society and to realize their full potential, a remarkable fact recognized the world over. For bravely continuing to lead despite all odds to ensure Afghan women have a voice and the opportunity to build a peaceful and inclusive Afghanistan. For this and so much more, Georgetown is proud to present the 2021 Hillary Rodham Clinton Award for Advancing Women, Peace, and Security to Palwasha Hassan. Growing up during the war in Zimbabwe, Nyaradzayi Gumbonzvanda learned that being poor, rural, and a girl does not mean you do not have potential. It simply means you do not have possibilities. Learned that being poor, rural, and a girl also does encourage you to develop those possibilities. Despite limitations, she began practicing law to realize a world of possibilities where the dignity and rights of young girls were enshrined and protected in the Constitution. From her early involvement with the Zimbabwe Women Leaders Association and as a young civil society activist, she was selected to attend the Beijing conference, where she saw firsthand how the issues about poverty, violence against women and girls in Africa were high on the agenda. She saw that change can happen, that we are stronger as a collective, and that the legacy of the conference stretched far beyond the borders of China. The conference sparked her decades-long career as an advocate for gender equality in crisis countries and human rights work to ensure that policy commitments make a tangible difference in the lives of women and girls. Her influential global platforms include serving as General Secretary of the World YWCA, a global movement of over 25 million. She founded the Rosario Memorial Trust to help resource poor young people, and she served as the African Union's Goodwill Ambassador for ending child marriage. Much of her work has focused on ensuring adolescent girls have the resources and support they need to achieve their potential, education, healthcare, to be free from violence. And most recently, she played a leading role in crafting the United Nations Generation Equality Commitments to realize the commitments made 25 years ago in Beijing continue to this day. And now for the citation. For her commitment to advancing the full rights and opportunities for women and girls, particularly in the most vulnerable and crisis-affected countries. For ensuring that global policies reflect the value and lived experience of every woman and girl, and that they are backed by the political will and resources to achieve their intent. And for her dedication to building partnerships and coalitions in service to women and girls everywhere, for her unwavering belief that change is possible, and determination to ensure the spirit of the Beijing Conference can live on to this day. Georgetown is proud to present the 2021 Hillary Rodham Clinton Award for Advancing Women in Peace and Security to Nyaradzayi Gumbonzvanda of Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Ambassador Melanie Vivier. When I received your letter that I have been nominated as an awardee for this year's Hillary Rodham Clinton Award, it sounded so unbelievable. But it's true. Thank you. Former Secretary of State and First Lady of the United States of America, Madam Hillary Rodham Clinton, former Secretary of State, Your Excellency, Madam Albright, my sisters and awardees for 2021, congratulations. Friends, brothers and sisters, invited guests, it is a true honor for me to be amongst you today and to receive this award. When about 50 years ago, when I was born and growing up as a little girl in rural Zimbabwe during the War of Liberation, being raised by my mother, a widow, I struggling to get an education. I didn't know that a day like today would arrive, for I didn't. For I, like other little girls, rural girls, thought that human rights are far away from where I am. Attending the Beijing conference in 1995 and now advocating for women's rights in terms of peace and in terms of conflict, being entrusted by the African Union to serve as the AU Goodwill Ambassador on ending child rape, which we seek to normalize by calling it child marriage. I feel that today, in this award, is a clear message to rural girls out there, to young women out there, that you are more than a statistic, you are more than a footnote, you are more than a photo in a big report. You are a person endowed with human rights. You can be creative, you can be innovative, and you are part of the change that we seek to see every day. I dedicate this award to ordinary women in our communities, like my late mother, Rosaria, who are changing lives and yet who are invisible. I also dedicate this award to the many, many women, men, boys and girls who are keeping the spirit of Beijing alive and who are daring to say women's rights are human rights everywhere and all the time. Thank you so much for honoring me and for according me this highest honor. I'm pleased to say and will remain on our feet, on my feet. For some of us, fighting for human rights is not a choice. It is a duty. It is a way of life, because silence is not an option in the face of injustice and inequalities, and especially today as we face the continued conflicts, the COVID-19, and the scourge of poverty. But together we can bring the transformation that we seek, carried and propelled by the spirit of Beijing, of CEDAW, and the collective women's movement. I thank you very much.
Even though Nyaradzayi could not be with us, I think we all agree that was a very powerful statement and a call to action from her as well. Guo Jianmei is a pioneering Chinese women's rights lawyer. Born into poverty and witnessing the marginalization of women, she yearned to improve the rights of women. She attended Peking University Law School, and she attended the UN Fourth World Conference for Women, and it proved to be a turning point in her life. She said, "There were tens of thousands of delegates from all over the world. They spoke different languages, they wore different clothes, they represented different races and faiths, but they were all talking about one thing: what we could do to protect the rights of women who made up half the world's population." Later that year, she and others founded the Peking Law School's Women's Legal Research and Services Center. It was the first organization of its kind in China, specializing in women's legal aid. To witness her work at the university some years later, Secretaries Clinton and Albright did so in 1998, and they were witnesses to her passion for her clients in need, women who were struggling with evictions, harassment, divorce, discrimination, land rights, and so much more. She was using the law to protect and advance their rights. At a time of great transformation in her country, she was a true trailblazer. Her work was not without risk, and some years later, the government ordered her center at the university to be shut down. She lost the security that was afforded to her by her affiliation with the university. Today, she continues her work, continues to bring cases, but it is not easy. She takes personal risks to ensure the protection of women's rights as human rights. And now the citation. For her commitment to safeguarding women's rights through the practice of law, despite confronting harassment and risking her own security, for her courage, humanity, and dedication, and for recognizing the rights of women who comprise half the population of the world, but remain too often marginalized and living on the outskirts of opportunity. Georgetown is proud to present the 2021 Hillary Rodham Clinton Award for Advancing Women, Peace, and Security to Guo Jianmei, a women's rights advocate in China. Guo is not able to be with us, nor is she able to send a video message. This is a challenging time for women's rights in China. She did, however, send this message, which I will read. Thank you for honoring me with the Hillary Clinton Award for Advancing Women, Peace, and Security. I wish I could be with all of you. Like so many, in 1995, I attended the UN Conference on Women in Beijing. I still remember how inspired I was when I heard Hillary say, human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights. I wanted to help women in my country. That's why I founded the Women's Legal Research and Services Center at the Peking University Law School. And I was very honored when Hillary and Madeleine Albright came to our center to hear what we were doing by helping women using the law. I continue to try to support women's rights, and I want to thank Secretary Clinton for meeting me in China in 2010. And I want to thank all of you at Georgetown University for this award. And I just want to say thank you, Guo, for all you continue to do. And now I know you want a chance to hear from our wonderful awardees. And we have a few questions for them and then questions from the students as well. And we will begin with you, Patricia. You, as we've heard now, were active at the Beijing conference, putting together or trying to help put the platform for action together. Maybe you could tell us a little bit how that influenced you professionally, personally, and then let's fast forward to climate change. And you've been overseeing negotiations, you've been a strong proponent for inclusive participation. How are we doing? How would you rate our progress from being that young diplomat all those years ago to trying to really move the needle all the way to the COP conference from Beijing?
Well, thank you. If you allow me, let me start by saying how emotional, how thankful, how humbled, how privileged I feel today being here with all of you and receiving this extraordinary award from an extraordinary woman that I admire so much. Not only me, but so many people around the world. And thank you, Hillary. Thank you, Milan, also for these very generous ways of presenting myself and the work that I have done. It is really, really moving for me. Well, let's go to Beijing, 1995. Beijing was a change, in my view, Beijing was a change in human history. I think we really need to see it in this bigger dimension. Sometimes we speak about, yes, it was a change regarding women's issues. No, it was a change in human history. For me personally, it changed me professionally and personally. It was the first time that I was there sitting and listening to these women coming from so many different parts of the world and talking about challenges they were facing that I had no idea they existed. And I went to school, I was educated, so I was just, it was an eye-opener. It was also the first time that I saw Secretary Clinton in action. And it was just amazing. As a young diplomat, it made me understand clearly how important it is that in addition to the technical negotiations, you have political leadership. And that takes a lot of courage. We heard from Secretary Clinton, she was immediately facing pushback, I imagine here and elsewhere as well. But she decided to stand for that agenda. And that is something that is very frequently missing in international affairs in order to address global issues. Now, let me go to climate change. Climate change, as Melen, as you said, was not specifically discussed in Beijing. We were not really talking so much about climate change, although I have to say scientists already knew about this. But we did address the issue of environmental protection at Beijing. What is the situation? Climate change is today the biggest threat to humanity, and it affects women disproportionately. Climate change is a threat multiplier. So if we think about vulnerable women, just imagine how this affects them. Hillary mentioned some of the ways that women are affected in her wonderful remarks. So it would be the logical question to make sure that women are also taken into account in the solutions for addressing climate change. But that is not the case currently. So imagine, can we think that we can get a solution for a global problem if we are not fully taking into account half of the population of the world, their needs, their expectations, their specific realities? So unfortunately, we're still very far. So we just had, as Melen was mentioning, COP26 in Glasgow. Over 30,000 participants. It's true, in many of the rooms, you could see quite a number of women. But how many women were in decision-making positions? That is another story. Let me tell you an anecdote. The first day of the conference, we had the presence of over 120 heads of state and government. They went to a reception in the evening. The family picture was taken. Some of you may have seen that picture. It was social media. Well, we could only see maybe 4 or 5 women there in that picture, and one of them was me. I'm not a head of state or government, but I was there. So it just, to me, it was really striking. It's like the picture of power in the 21st century. That is not acceptable. We need to react. Yes, a lot has changed since Beijing 1995, but we're still very far from ensuring that women have the place that belongs to them in society, in all walks of life, and particularly in power. So when I think about all of this situation, it was very disappointing to see all those heads of state and government and so few women. You may ask me, well, but why do you keep on going? And I think it's for those of us who are privileged to have the opportunity to make a contribution in addressing such an important issue for humanity, it's an ethical issue. It's just, we cannot give up for our own sake, for the sake of our families, for the sake of the whole of society. And if you were there at Glasgow conference listening to the people coming from the islands and how for them, the Prime Minister of Barbados, for example, saying, you know, for many of you here, 1.5 or 2 are just numbers. For us, 2 is a death sentence. So it is really all these inspiring leaders and women especially that I have met throughout my career. Here we have 2 of them, and then we have new friends and leaders that really inspire me to go on. Thank you very much for this award. It will become and additional inspiration for me to keep going.
So Marina, we know that Beijing also influenced you, and it was the first time that violence against women was put on the international agenda and chiseled into international law. It was a crime, not just a family matter. So how did it influence you? And when you think about it, it is so pervasive today. COVID has made it that much worse. What interventions work? What more can we be doing?
Thank you very much, Milan. Well, I want to echo Patricia and thank for this amazing award and for words of encouragement, inspiration, and support. Beijing conference was truly a life-changing event for me, because before that I was working as a crisis center for women, serving women, helping to escape, helping them to save their lives. But when I heard you, Hillary, speaking and saying women's rights are human rights, it was really, it totally changed me. I suddenly realized that what I'm doing, it's much bigger than I ever could imagine, and it's much deeper. It's not a social issue, it's human rights issue. It's women's human rights issue. And that we do have a right to demand our rights to be fulfilled. So when I came back, we changed everything we were doing. We started working with the society, educating about domestic violence as women's human rights violation. And the second very important instrument that everybody is talking here about is the platform of action, because it also gave us a right to demand accountability from our government. Back then, it worked. And it was actually great because we had a plan for implementing Beijing platform of action, and government tried to implement that, so everything worked. But then everything started declining. Now we have a movement across the country. When I started, I was alone. Now we have a movement, but in Russia, like in many other parts of the world, frontline activists are holding this line, saving lives, but still being threatened, underfunded, not supported. And also we are doing a job what actually governments should do. So we do need a new instrument that would give us a right and also protection. We need to keep our governments accountable. We need to be protected, because when I'm threatened, there is no obligation from the state to investigate it or stopping it. So we do need, I think what we need a new framework. There is a coalition called Every Woman Coalition, and we are advocating for a new global treaty, new agreement, protecting women and girls from violence. We need to review everything that we have and take it to the next step to ensure security of women and girls, because climate change is the first threat. Violence against women and girls on our planet is another threat. Everybody knows the statistics, 1 in 3 women. Just think about that. These are real women and girls. But it's also a shadow pandemic, as it has been described during COVID. COVID demonstrated how actually vulnerable we are, how vulnerable are women, girls, activists, everybody who's working in this field. So I am advocating, and I think we do need a new global value of women and girls' safety. But not just in words. We need it in written agreement, we need it with funding, because prevention of violence against women currently is only 0.002% of global development programs. That's how much it is a priority. So I think everything we are doing, and Beijing really was and is an inspiration, and it also demonstrated us back then how high can be a standard for protecting women and girls on Earth. We just need to follow it and make it a reality with all the full commitments from all 89 governments who signed that. We want to bring that back and to make sure that there are no backlashes, that there are no excuses, that it is a true priority and not just in words, in actions. Thank you.
So, Palwasha, you were a young woman. You went to Beijing. It had a special effect on you. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what happened to you, how it inspired you. And then I think we'd all like to know, given what's happening in Afghanistan, what can women within the country, people like you and your sisters here, and so many others who've had to leave, what can you do still to further this agenda, and what can we do to help you?
Thank you, Ambassador. First of all, I'd like to thank Secretary Clinton, President of Georgetown, Mr. DeJoya, and yourself for giving us this opportunity and honoring us with this award. Thank you very much. I think it's an incredible, emotional morning for me, having shared this stage with incredible women from Russia, from Mexico, and Secretary Clinton, who has inspired me, and thousands of other women in Beijing, which I remember and reflect back. As you see, my country, where I'm standing, emotionally I find myself in ground zero, where my country stands today. And that is all bringing so much emotion in my mind. Looking positively to what happened in Beijing, I think it was extremely turning point in my life as part of Young Leaders program that I joined then, and listening to the very famous quote that everybody mentioned this morning, human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights, are still echoing in my ear as well. Coming back from Beijing, I never looked back till today, and I've been privileged that I've been joined by hundreds and thousands of Afghan women who, some of them are today sharing this platform or joining this stage, have been part of a movement for women. We thought among what was going in Afghanistan for the last 40 years, more than 4 decades now, we are part of a country which is in conflict with itself. But this war has not been started by women and not pursued by women. We always
taken side on the right side of history of our country. I accept this award on behalf of all strong Afghan women who wake up every morning with a new challenge, but they stand tall and resilient as ever. I take my energy from all those young women who still so strongly stands on the streets of Kabul, standing for their rights, for what is very basic rights and needs of any woman and man in the world: education, work, and treatment as a human being. They deserve that, and we need work to stand with all those women. Personally, I think for many of us who feel privileged to be among you today, escaping all the dangers which was immediately many of my colleagues and us face, and today we are here with your help. We have the duty and responsibility to stand with all those women who are still in Afghanistan, who are still working hard to make difference for themselves and for their fellow country women and men and children who deserve best, who has been strong support and our partner in Afghanistan reconstruction, in struggle for democracy. And I think the sacrifice that Afghans have given, probably there is very less match in the rest of the world for all those nations who are facing conflict at this level. And I think today that Afghanistan is facing a humanitarian catastrophe. More than half of the population are facing or are at risk of famine. We need humanitarian aid to be delivered to Afghanistan. But in this delivery and the support to Afghanistan, women should be partner and driver of the support and extending hands to those who are in need. This should not be in price of leaving women isolated or recognizing Taliban for what they are not recognizing. The right of people of Afghanistan, inclusivity, and above all, the women participation. We cannot stand in ground zero forever. Women's rights cannot be frozen. We don't need months and years to, like last time, to lose the life of each and every young Afghan woman who deserves to be in university, who deserves to be in college. That cannot be compensated always. So we need to start now and have no wait for that. And I think those Afghans deserve the support to be sustained politically and financially, so that Afghanistan once again come out of this misery where it is situated right now.
Thank you, Palwasha. We have a question from a student, Marco Ustal, which is going to go to Secretary Clinton. What is the role of the United States in promoting gender equality around the world? Is it explicitly exemplary, or does the U.S. have a duty to intervene in cases of gross human rights abuse?
Well, I think it's very much in the interests of our country to be a leader on gender equality. And certainly that has been a continuing theme for a number of years, that it has to be both part of our foreign policy and part of our development and diplomacy efforts. So just in a quick set of examples, in the time I was at the State Department, we really embedded women's rights as part of our foreign policy in a number of ways. We not only talked a lot about it, we not only tried to support advocates and organizations around the world who were our allies, as well as governments that shared the same values. And we had a fund that we started in the Agency for International Development, USAID, on gender equality, particularly focused on the well-being and rights of the LGBTQ community, particularly in the face of drastic oppression, repression, campaigns against people that even included passing, in some places, the death penalty for the status of being LGBTQ. So our gender equality agenda at that time was very much front and center. In the annual human rights report that the State Department issued, we included the assessment of how countries were dealing with women's rights. And we had a little bit of a break in the years following the Obama administration in terms of emphasizing women's rights and roles, but I'm happy to say that emphasis has returned. And in fact, under the Biden administration, the first government-wide gender equality agenda has been adopted. I don't know if Jen Klein from the White House is here, but she and her colleagues in the White House, including Rachel Vogelstein, who's a real scholar of women's rights and its development around the world, really spearheaded an effort that would be whole of government, and not only abroad, but at home. How do we do everything we can to ensure that we're not just adding and embedding women's rights in our foreign policy, but we are trying to be exemplary. You know, it is pretty hard to justify being one of the very few developed countries with no paid family leave, without an adequate, quality, affordable child care system. So we're trying to not only stand up, speak out against oppression, against discrimination, against violence against women, stand up for inclusion in every decision, particularly with climate change and other very demanding, urgent decisions. But we're also trying to make sure here at home we're doing more to lift up women's rights and our full participation in society. So I think it's fair to say that we're kind of, you know, back in the leadership role that we should always be in when it comes to standing up for women's rights, because at the end of the day, there is, as the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security includes in their curriculum and have done research on, there is a direct correlation between women's rights and women's full participation in society and democracy and the national security of the United States. So if we cannot persuade you that this should be done because it's a moral imperative and it's the right thing to do, and I think as you know, you've heard, it's an incredible necessary step literally in human history, then think about it from a very self-interested view about how we keep the United States and our interests front and center as well. So I'm encouraged that we're back in a leadership role, and I'm hoping that we will continue to not only demonstrate in our own country what that means, but be an ally for activists and courageous, committed women like the ones before you.
We have one last question I'm going to put to the three honorees, very brief response. And that comes from Sophia Hager, a student here at Georgetown. In what areas do you think the generation of women sitting in this audience today are best positioned to make change? Patricia, let's start with you.
Well, looking at this audience, seeing so many young women, but also young men, I would say that in this pivotal moment in history, you really have the very rare opportunity to make a dramatic change in history. We know that the way that we have been doing things is not sustainable, that we are investing in our own destruction. And it's very clear. We're not talking about the future of the planet. The planet will be there. It will change, but it will be there. It's about life and specifically human life in the planet. Also other species, by the way, full ecosystems. So you have this opportunity. Looking at the tools that you get in an institution like Georgetown, the energy that you have, sometimes maybe also the anger that you feel and the frustration that you feel because there is not enough change happening and it's not happening with the speed that is needed. But you can make the difference. And you can do it from the point of the area that you choose, whether you're a lawyer, whether you decide not to make university studies, everywhere. Advocate for that. And that change includes, it's comprehensive. It includes, yes, the climate, but it is in the center, as we have seen today, of women's rights. It is in the center of a development that can ensure a good and healthy life for your generation and generations to come.
Marina?
Well, yes. As I said, violence against women and girls is a second most dangerous issue on earth and in our civilization. I fully support what you said, Patricia, because I do believe that we need to stop climate change. And we need to abandon all harmful practices, including violence. And violence against women and girls is the most common spread violence on earth. And it's been going on for thousands of years. So I think I've done my share of work trying to stop it. And I do count on younger generation to continue that and see the result. See that women and girls can fully enjoy life without being afraid of violence. That women can participate in political life and not being harassed and attacked because they're women. That women and girls can enjoy full social life and not being attacked because of the choices they make. And I think this is the time to really raise it globally and make it change. We do need to eliminate violence against women and girls on earth.
Thank you, Marina.
I think coming from a country where 70% of the population are younger generation, so I certainly believe that young people can make a difference. But I just want to remind you that sitting here in this hall, remember that education is just not for granted for many young people who are your age and who are so much inspired to study and have the opportunity to be in such institution. So use this as a way not only in your personal life, but a change for everyone. We are part of, we are global citizen, and we should look beyond our borders and territory to feel what others are going through and how we can all together change this world, whether it is a safe planet or it is a home which is free of violence. Thank you.
Well, that brings us to the end of our awards ceremony, but perhaps the beginning of a much more concerted effort to truly make a difference in all the ways that you have just heard. I just have a couple of brief things to say before we can move on. For those interested, you might want to view the exhibition at the Georgetown Library on U.S. participation in the Beijing conference. It's about the preparations that we went through, the decisions that were made at the conference, and of course, its lasting impact. And you've heard a lot about lasting impact today. And I want to thank the library staff, especially the Dean of the Library, Harriet Hamasi, to Lulin Walker and Keith Gorman for all the work that went into assembling and displaying the collection, as well as the help of Rebecca Turkington, who used to work with us at the Institute and is now a student at Cambridge University. And if you don't realize it, it takes a village to mount a program like this. And I want to thank our Institute staff, especially Allie Smith, Jess Keller, Sarah Rutherford, Evelyn Garrity, Jennifer Grossman-Fernandez, Clara Chu, and the 40 student volunteers who made all of this possible. And a big thanks to Mary Haynes, who's the Director of Protocol and Events here. She's indispensable. So thanks to each of you, and thanks again to the extraordinary example that our honorees and our wonderful honorary chair of the Institute have demonstrated through their lives. May the work go on by all of us. And President Joy, if you'd come up for a moment, we can take a photo and memorialize this moment. And thank you all.